Good evening. I'd like to call to order the local planning agency meeting for June 4th, 2020. And before we call the roll, I'm going to turn it over to the city manager.
This is a meeting of the Land Planning Agency on June 4th at 5:30 p.m. Pursuant to Executive Order number 20-69 issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020, municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members present physically or at any specific location, and utilizing communications media technologies such as telephonic or video conferencing, as provided in Florida Statute 120.54. Procedures for public comment. By device. If you're attending by a device such as computer or laptop or smartphone, if you wish to speak during public comment, click the raise hand button on the bottom. Your microphone will be unmuted when it's your time to speak, and once your time is completed, we will mute your microphone again. If you're attending by telephone, press *9 to raise your hand. We will call you by your last 3 digits of the displayed phone number and unmute your microphone and then mute it back after speaking. There is no video capability for those who are attending for attendee only. Please state your name and address prior to public commenting clearly for the clerk. Board members are asked to advise whether they are here in person or attending remotely when the roll is called. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Chair Strom.
Here.
Vice Chair Roberts. Here. Board Member Massing.
I'm here electronically.
Board Member De La Vega.
Electronically here.
Board Member Herbach.
Here.
Board Member Rich.
Great.
Okay. Board Member Mathers.
Sorry.
Bill Mather, Board Member Mathers called me earlier and said he wouldn't be able to make it. He's got a bad back.
I think Campbell's trying to get on. Because he just texted.
Did you say he texted you?
Yeah, he just texted asking if I was on the, if we were on the meeting. So let me text him back, I guess.
I'm sorry, Ms. Pinkston sent out a corrected meeting location. I'm not sure if you got it. It's also on the website in the meetings area. I put a thing up there to make sure he comes to the right meeting. He's probably.
You should look at the email you sent today, Jordan.
Yeah, I sent it around 3-ish. I can text him if you need me to.
He's on this, so.
Want me to tell you the code?
Okay, I could do. Oh, you can text him. That makes sense.
Okay.
Okay. We do not have the minutes from the last meeting, so we do not need to approve the minutes. Do we have comments from the public on any non-agenda items? Any remote?
No one online, sir.
Do you have any comments from board members?
I do. So can we put on our agenda maybe for next time or next time we have something about electric vehicles?
Yeah, I was going to bring that up later because in our, what we're going to discuss tonight, it has a part about that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll do that then.
So, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Sounds good to me. Kevin, you got that?
What would you like staff to bring back a specific
Budget item for each of them to get it.
a specific
I think we need to talk about it. And
just a discussion?
Yeah.
Okay.
I have one comment though. I would like that at the next available meeting, we get to review the bylaws. Mike Mortel has come up with a new set of bylaws, which he emailed to me.
And just so you know, that's right. You had requested those some time ago, and then the Charter Review Board had made a recommendation that the city commissioners do the bylaws for boards, but that hasn't been adopted by the commission at this time. So if you're asking for that and the chair directs it, then if we put that on the next agenda.
What I'm saying is I have a copy of the old bylaws, and I think we need to have both of those so we can compare them or get different ideas, or this is how we did it. So when it does get put on the agenda, I would request it. The old bylaws and the new bylaws that Mike Mortel has be sent to us so we can compare them. maybe get some different ideas, make some comments, rather than just look at something new
Right.
without having any background. That's all I have to say.
Larry, Christina, any comments?
No,
Okay. We have one agenda item this evening. It's the evaluation and appraisal report, ordinance 2442-2020.
Thank you, Chair. Kev Freeman, Development Director. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the outcome of a number of workshops that were held. If you recall, a number of workshops were held including the LPA and the City Commission. We went through the state requirements in terms of comprehensive plan amendments that would be required. On top of that, we've included just a few staff recommended amendments, and we'll be going through those in a moment when we go through the slideshow. So we're going to kick off and just start a presentation. It's going to be a very brief presentation. You're going to have an opportunity to talk and discuss things as we move along. So I'll hand over to Steve Mayer, who's going to be presenting the item.
Good evening, Steve Mayer, Development Department. So the evaluation and appraisal report, or the EAR, is a process where it's an updating of the local comprehensive plan to reflect changes in local conditions and state policy concerning planning and growth management. The purpose of the EAR is to assess and evaluate the successes and the failures of the local comprehensive plan. The report is also required to address changes in local conditions, changes in state and regional policies on planning and growth management, and through adoption of related amendments to update the local comprehensive plan to address the issues raised in the EAR. I had shown you during the workshops this timeline of the EAR. We started this in June 2019 with staff review. We had public participation later in the year, 2019. We had public workshops earlier this year, 3 of them with the LPA and City Commission combined. And then we had a staff collaboration in the meantime during this COVID crisis. Finally, we are here. We are in the 5th and final stage. We have an LPA public hearing tonight, which will take your comments and be able to move that to a transmittal hearing with your comments to first reading at City Commission. We're requesting to have that moved to June.
I want.
Okay.
No, there's Jordan.
Oh, okay. We are requesting to have that moved to June 22nd. We may be able to do that incorporating your comments. Then that would be transmitted to the EAR to the state and then adopted at a final second reading of the ordinance. We anticipate that to happen either late July or early August. Our public outreach efforts so far have been to establish a web page landing to centralize the EAR information. We created a community participation flyer, which explains the process and encourage the participation. We advertise a kickoff meeting, went into the info bits, and then on all utility bills. We created a survey and distributed it to interest focus groups. We had outreach to focus groups. We also held focus groups with Stewart Main Street. We had 2 participation meetings for public, open to the public, one at City Hall, another at 10. And we had an outreach by an email blast and a Facebook page for public participation meetings, which included a survey. So now before you tonight is our final EAR report. The objective of the EAR is to update the comprehensive plans consistent with changes to state statutes. The EAR process identified a few policies that need rework and provided the recommendations. Staff has renumbered the comprehensive plan in the goals, objectives, and policies in the comprehensive plan so that we can refer to them more effectively. Staff has provided recommended policy language in those changes that are supported in the EAR, and we had in strike through and underline form each element with those policy text changes. Staff is seeking final approval and moving forward to City Commission on June 22nd. I would like to first speak to the required changes due to changes in Florida statutes. They were reviewed in public workshop and are attached as a separate document. They are entitled Exhibit 1 in your packet, Proposed Comprehensive Text Amendments for Statutory Requirements. At this time, staff requests if there are any comments regarding these required changes first, we can review them separately. There's a hand waved. I think that's Campbell Rich.
Finally got here.
Let the record show that Campbell Rich has arrived.
Okay, yes, would you like to discuss these first, these required element changes first? Or should I go on to all of the rest of the?
I don't care. I can do it either way. Did you want us to go to Exhibit 1 first, or did you want us to go?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so I only had one thing on Exhibit 1.
Okay.
Okay. Policy B 1.4. When you're talking about hurricane shelter space, we no longer refer to it as the Martin County Emergency Management Office. It's now called the Fire Rescue Agency. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so if that's true, there's a place in the plan attachment where it didn't get corrected then.
Okay, but do you remember the
Yeah, I can find it.
reference?
Hold on.
When did that change?
I don't know when, do you know when that changed, Amy? According to Amy Cardinal, our consultant who did the research, they may have changed last year to the naming convention.
Hang on, I'll find it.
Are we going to be able to see these or no?
Doesn't matter.
Say that again, Christina.
Are we going to be able to see what we're talking about?
Am I?
How do you want me to refer to this? It's on my page 90 of 242. It's under objective, new objective 1.B4, hurricane evacuation and planning. Policy number 1.B4.1. Do you see that? That starts with the city, police, and fire departments and city commission. Do you see that language?
Policy B14.
No.
No.
Policy B41.
Okay, policy B41. Okay.
Policy 1B41 is the new number. The old number is policy B41.
Understand, okay.
But now you've added a 1 in front of the B.
Okay, and that,
Do you,
yeah,
do you see the language that says the city, police, and fire departments? That language?
okay,
So in that paragraph, you're still referring to it as the Martin County Emergency Management Office.
okay,
Okay?
thank you.
All right?
Oh, this is
Thanks, Ty.
that's a good one, yeah.
Good. Okay. They're trying to get it up.
Yeah, which is good. Sorry.
Okay, so this is Exhibit 1 that we're referring to that we'd like you to focus on. These are required statutory changes. If there are any inconsistencies or some kind of comments that you would like to have for these policies first, let's get these out of the way as required changes, and then we can go forward to some of the recommended changes.
So what page of 242 is this?
What page? This is Exhibit 1. What page of the
Of the document we have in front of us?
It starts on page 65 is where Exhibit 1 starts.
Thank you, Board Member. Part
Thank
65. Okay.
It's only a few pages long, runs from 65 to 71. And then
Okay. Got it. Got it.
paying attention. Of course, I read it twice. I wasn't paying attention.
Okay, if there are no comments on this section, we can move on to the other sections of our here.
Okay, I have no comments. Are there any other comments?
No.
No.
I have three, not on this, but.
No, not on this.
No, not on
Okay.
We're just doing
On
it.
Exhibit 1, any other comments?
No.
Okay, seeing none, let's move on.
Okay, thank you. So the ear-based amendments that are recommended in the ear report, they fall into two different categories. There are follow-ups that require more work, and then there are those that have some direct changes that staff has included into the elements and marked up into those elements. We also have the following slides, recommended changes that are by staff. And we're going to go through the recommended changes by staff first. And then after that, I think it might be best to either discuss those changes and then move on to the elements. So let me turn it over to Kev so he can explain these changes.
Kev Friedman again for the record. I'm going to go through some really housekeeping changes to the comp plan, and these have been required because of some actions that have been taken by the LPA and the City Commission, and this is to tidy up the language in the comprehensive plan to help enforce some of those new land development codes. We're just trying to clarify it as much as we can, so in terms of interpretation and the intent of those land development codes. And if you recall, in the recent past, the LPA and the City Commission both approved the new urban planned unit development process. As part of that process, there was a code change to allow counting of smaller units as half a density in those proposals. This language is incorporated into the new policy entitled 1.A7.2 of the future land use element. And the language that we're proposing is, and I'll read the entire policy out, I think. Gross densities, gross intensities, and proportional use amounts for each land use category are established in the table of land use densities and intensities that is adopted as part of this element. In order to promote the efficient use of land and to provide an attainable housing stock, and we're referring there to policy 3.A2.6, housing opportunities, the city's land development code shall provide adjustment through the, and I've added the word urban here, we had some comment back from the city attorney to limit this to the urban planned unit development process, to accommodate smaller residential units and allow smaller housing units to be calculated at no less than half a density per unit. So that now is a clarification of the code that was adopted by City Commission and the local planning agency in the recent past. And if that language makes sense, I'm willing to open that up and ensure that language makes sense and it's clear enough for people to understand what that's trying to do.
Makes sense to me. Any comments?
Is attainable defined somewhere?
Yeah, good question.
I'm coming, well, is to provide an attainable housing stock. I'm going to go through and look at a code change to the definition in the housing piece, which may, with your question, may need additional work, but we'll move on to that. That's coming up.
Okay.
So shall I move on to the next? Thank you.
I mean, isn't it sort of circular 3.8, 2.6 is basically what you're saying there. In a way. I'm just looking at it.
It's just,
But I mean, Larry, oh, yeah, Larry's question is the important one. What is specifically the definition of
Well,
attainable?
we'll move on to that in a moment.
Okay.
The reason why we quote the housing opportunities policy is to reinforce the this language in the future land use element.
And to Larry's comment, I know that in your 3A2 definitions, you took out HUD and you're going.
I'm going to
off
come
on-
to that, yes.
Going off on your own, but
Yeah.
But that's why they specifically use the word affordable and define affordable rather than attainable. So I don't know whether attainable is the word you want to use without defining attainable, because attainable means that it's affordable. And
In every category, attainable.
It's in its individual category.
Yeah.
So it's in its individual category. So I may be able to attain, for example, I can attain very low income housing, or I
Yes.
can attain
Yes.
low income housing, or
Yes.
I can attain workforce housing.
Yes.
But it's attainable as long as it's not costing me more than 30% of my income. It's affordable if that's what that is. Attainable, I don't know whether you want to use the two words interchangeably, I guess is what I'm
I
trying to say.
don't, this is not directed to be related to affordable housing. This is related to be providing the opportunity to reduce the cost of providing housing stock.
Then maybe it doesn't even need to be there. Maybe it just needs to be provide housing stock. And it doesn't need to say attainable as a word that you're trying to.
I'll look at that.
Because I'm interpreting it as exactly that, attainable. So if I agree with Lee that I don't think you need the word there. Just the housing stock is, if that's what you're trying to achieve.
Yes, that is precisely what we're trying to achieve.
Okay.
And if that's true, your definition of housing opportunities in policy A26 is talking about, and I'll read it, in order to expand the number and types of opportunities for affordable housing. So the reference that you're making back to 3A26 is specifically talking about affordable. So if you're going to delete attainable, you may also
Sure. Yes.
want to, in housing opportunities, also delete the affordable piece there. And we're just trying to increase the amount of housing,
That's a good point.
you know, I mean,
Yeah.
just so that you're
Yeah.
not.
Well, Kev, you were asked to define attainable. You've yet to do that. Why don't you go? This seems to be a sticking point here. Why don't you define what you mean by that?
Well, that's a question we're going to come to. I think the point with this language is to increase the housing stock. The language that we're going to be looking at later, I think there's an opportunity there to define what attainable or affordable is. And I'll move on to that in a moment.
Okay. I think before we throw it out, let's let him define it.
We'll just mark it and come
Yeah.
back. Maybe you just keep
Let's mark
going in
it
your
and
right
move on.
order.
No.
And the table of gross densities that's included in the table, just following that policy, where the UPUD is a new planned unit development creation, and we're recommending that the UPUD be included in the residential density limitation of 30 units per acre. It's not included in that table at the moment. And we're also asking the LPA to consider adjusting the maximum density in East Stewart to be in line with the community redevelopment area, major urban code exception, and UPUD and RPUD application types. In that table, East Stewart is called out at having a maximum of 17 units per acre. All the other categories that are residential in nature look at 30 units per acre. So the rational, change there would be to make it 30 units per acre. But we understand if a lower limit would be wanted to be placed on East Stewart. But we're seeing that as a limitation on potential redevelopment activities in East Stewart.
Kev, is this about that?
Table, immediately after
Table of land use-
1A7.2.
Table of land use
Yes.
densities and intensities?
Yes.
So you're intending to add, besides having low-density residential, multifamily residential, commercial, to also add UPUD?
At the top of the column where it says,
Oh, I see what you mean.
yes,
Okay, I just.
and that would be RPUD and UPUD.
I have a question on that. Is that something that we've already considered?
It's not been considered as such. It was part of a staff initiative some time ago where we discussed that. The code at the moment, the land development code, would probably need to be adjusted to accommodate this additional selling unit per
You're
acre.
asking for this because they're asking for this for a certain development,
No,
but it's about to come up, right?
this is not in respect of any development that we have in at the moment. There are development proposals in that area, but this is not necessarily required for that development.
You feel we need to increase density in East Stewart?
To bring it in line with the community redevelopment area, yes.
And Kev, why do you have it at 25 and not 30?
It was just to,
Either or.
decrease the shock value, maybe, and to understand that the community has, in the past, been not fully supportive of a 30 unit per acre limit. It's hard to understand why that table has 17 units per acre with the East Stewart. It seems.
If I can I chime in for a second? Historically, I can tell you that what originally happened was the city had the original code that was 15 and 30, and then East Stewart asked for, had workshops, et cetera, and it was back when they had the East Stewart Main Street and some other things, and the East Stewart development area felt like the process for development was too expensive and too hard. So in order to make it so that the East Stewart folks could get out of doing full PUDs and the expense of all the hearings, we created this conditional use in the CRA that was intended for one meeting, and then it was still too complicated. And they said, okay, well, let's increase the density for East Stewart from 15 units to 17 units an acre by right. And when they increased the density from 15 units to 17 units an acre by right for East Stewart, no one discussed the potential for a PUD like the rest of the city to go to 30 units an acre. And it got kind of dropped off and it never got discussed again. So what's happened as a matter of time is that no one's actually done any development in East Stewart. And then the baseball fields a few years ago kind of started creating some interest in East Stewart. And we found that most people want to be treated very similar to this average of like 23 units or whatever it might be. But there is no thing. It's just the 17 that was added on to exceed the 15. But it never did the option of the PUD because it was tied into that urban code conditional use, or at the time it wasn't even called that, it was called a special exception. And they wanted to avoid even having a special exception, so they gave them 17 units an acre so they could do some straight building. It didn't work anyway. We didn't get any building as a result. But that's kind of the history of what happened.
So right now, what you're saying is, right now what we have is we have 17 by right,
Yeah.
and we also have the 17 by PUD. Whereas normally, the PUD number is higher than the
Yes.
by right number.
If you look through that table, I'm not sure if that was a scrivener's error that wasn't carried through to the PUD, or there was some discussion in that when that table was adopted?
You know, after that, there's been discussions and it's never gone anywhere. But the reality is, back in the day, it was more like it just kind of got lost in the shuffle, sadly.
Yeah.
And is this because it's the urban code rather than treating East Stewart, because it's part of the CRA, but it's not really urban? So I'm probably getting confused here, but all over the city, it's not 25 or 30, right? It's in the urban district. Is that correct, or is that wrong?
The majority of the city is up to 15 units by acre, and then 30 with a PUD, with the exception of like the R1 districts. But East Ocean Boulevard, you know, US 1, all the major arteries, Canner Highway, what's the Central Parkway,
Yeah.
Those locations up near Windermere, all that is the 15/30 concept. And when you talk about urban versus not urban, urban is not necessarily a high-rise building, because East Stewart, by definition as well, doesn't have any lot size dimension. So it would probably be considered the most urban residential area in Stewart. But it doesn't have the ability to do multifamily above 17 units an acre.
Okay.
I don't know, it's kind of complicated. That's
So what we want to do is make East Stewart like the rest of all the rest that isn't R1. Is that correct?
Well, the intent is to make the table make more sense and be more fair, to be applicable to all neighborhoods that are not low density residential, and may go either through the urban code exception or the PUD, urban PUD, or the residential PUD route.
So everything else that you have for PUD, for housing, with the exception of that R1 piece,
Yes.
is just less than 30 per acre. So,
Yes.
because I'm looking at it,
Yes.
and it's multifamily,
Yes.
whether you're in or out,
Yes.
you're going from 10 by right, somewhere between 10 and 11 by right, 15 by right, and both of those go up to 30 with a PUD.
Yes.
Then if the next one that I look at is office residential,
Yes.
whether you're in or out with the PUD, you can go just under 30.
Yes.
Downtown redevelopment is 15 by right and then 30 with a PUD.
Yes.
And so, yeah, it looks like it was not treated fairly for them. I mean, that's what that neighborhood looks like. It was not treated fairly.
That's what
I mean, the same way that if you
it wasn't. Yeah. Let's be very clear.
It's not about fairness.
It wasn't not treated fairly. They were treated fairly. Everybody was treated fairly.
Of course.
There was some oversight.
Yes.
No, but it makes sense. And I mean, and I don't understand why you're not bumping it up to 30.
Well, that's what I'm asking the LPA.
It would be more consistent. If
That's,
it was 30 and
If it was
consistency
30,
is the correct word that I'm looking for here. Not,
consistent, then trying to
Yes.
carve out another
Yes.
25, because already your 17 by right is higher than the 10 or the 15. So
Well, this-
it would make you think then
Yes.
that the 30 is too low and it should actually be higher than the 30. You know?
I think if you're thinking that way, yes. But as you know, City Attorney has just pointed out, the 17 is really intended to help that bump start,
Help that
Yeah.
housing.
help
start.
that transition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it should be 30.
Me too.
Do you want to take a
Vote?
vote on that one? That might be useful,
Sure.
please.
Let's take a vote on whether we think it should be 25 or 30. So the motion was from Lee to make it 30. Do we have a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Mike, second. Will you call the roll?
Board Member Rich,
Yes.
Board Member Herbach,
Yes.
Board Member Della Vega,
Yes.
Board Member Massing,
Yes.
Vice Chair Roberts,
Yes.
and Chair Storm.
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you. Now, here we're coming to policy 3.A2.1, which is looking at the definitions. Now, the reason behind removing the HUD standards and definitions and the US Housing and Urban Development Department references is that over time, those have not reflected in entirety the actual level of income that is represented by the municipal limits of the city of Stuart. Those standards and definitions refer to the Port St. Lucie MSA and Martin County. So we've seen the differential between the median income in Martin County and the median income in the city of Stuart. There was also conflict between these definitions and the Code of Ordinances. We also had City Commission workshops which discussed the definitions and the criteria that we should be using to measure median income. And it was determined at those workshops that we should be using the census information regarding median income for the municipal boundaries of the city of Stuart. So that's the reason why we have taken those references out and modified those definitions to remove the term workforce housing and replace moderate income with workforce income, as that would fall between 80 and 120%.
So I believe that the AMI, right, the annual median income, is defined as a number that's coming from the census number, correct? It's not coming from, they're not making it up on their own. HUD isn't making up the AMI, are they?
No, but HUD measure those in terms of metropolitan service areas. And so in terms of the city, we're included in the Martin County piece of Port St. Lucie metropolitan service area, which is a higher AMI. I think the AMI for that is around 59.
59.5.
Thank you, Lee. And when we look at the census information for the AMI for the city of Stuart, it's in the maybe high 40s. So that impacts tremendously what you would be looking at then for 30% of household income, or what that percentage would be.
That makes sense to me.
So when you do that, do you still want to, you want to, so okay, I can understand that then what that does is it changes the threshold for very low and low. But if the generally accepted, regardless of how you're measuring the income piece, if the generally accepted method is that moderate is between 80 and 120 and workforce is above 120 to 140, do you still want to keep those definitions and just change?
I think from our perspective, just so you know, that's where we get when you say 120, 120% of what?
So that's the point I'm making. So the point I'm making is that those four categories, right? Very low income, moderate, and workforce are kind of like defined categories of that's what this is.
That's
right?
when we, if I can interrupt, I think I know where you're going.
Wait for it.
I'm trying.
Okay. The stalemate, but so I can understand wanting to use the census number instead. Okay, I can understand that the AMI number that's coming from, because it's measuring metropolitan areas, yes. I can understand instead of using that larger swath,
yes,
any more than if they tried to give us an AMI that was 3 counties big and said, oh, you're from Palm Beach, Martin, and St. Lucie, here's your AMI, and your AMI is now some other ridiculous number. So I can understand that, but when you're actually running the percentages, so if you're saying that the census number is, what's the median income for census?
I think it's around 49, 46 to
The
49.
median household income for the city of Stewart from the Census Bureau is 47,371.
But this is a better measure.
So I don't know where that 59 comes from.
That's the county.
Yeah,
Oh, the county.
whole thing.
Hood.
It's a better measure because you're measuring Stewart.
So this isn't anything what the commission directed from their workshop.
Okay.
So we're gonna have to revisit this whole thing.
Yeah.
Well, this isn't anything like what they directed from the workshop, on our housing workshop.
Oh.
I mean, because I think it's problematic, you know, I mean, so anybody who's coming in to develop something, right, already knows what those breaks are. That you can, what the actual income number that you're using, the median income number that you're using is different. But what those actual breaks are, I mean, it's already well understood that affordable housing is considered 120 to 140%. And so if I take your 47,371, trusting my fellow board member.
I'm looking at the U.S. Census Bureau page. So.
That would mean that workforce housing, right? So you would take the 47,371, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you would say that, okay, I can make 120% of that 47,341, right? So I have 47,371 times, I'm making, my annual income is 56,845. And then I've got to get, I can only spend 30% of that on my housing.
Mm-hmm.
So I can only spend $17,054 a year on housing, not counting utilities. I divide that by 12, and I come up that workforce housing is running between 1421 to some number, right? Whereas if you're saying it's 80 to 120%, you're kind of redefining terms that are already there, right? You're saying that the low end of the income is 37,897. And you can't charge more than 11,369, not counting utilities, which means your rent has to be less than 300, has to be 947 a month.
Right, that's why the city commission went with the higher number of 59 and did the, because they also said that most of the people looking for housing in Stewart are coming from the surrounding area. They're not coming from within Stewart and looking for housing in Stewart. They're coming from Jensen Beach and Hobe Sound and Port St. Lucie and it's Palm City, et cetera. And as a result, the discussion was go with the, I thought it was the Port St. Lucie number.
Yeah, it's the MSA, either out of Ship or HUD. I can't remember
Right.
which one.
And then
I thought there was a discussion to use the census.
No, we never talked about census at all.
Well,
I mean, it doesn't matter. That's the point of this workshop. That's why we're having it. So we can
It matters a lot. There's a huge difference between 47 and 59. I mean, clearly it should not say Stewart.
My
Stewart.
point is, I think that
Sure.
4 categories, you ought to keep the 4 categories. There's nothing to stop somebody coming in and saying, we want you to not just have workforce housing, we also want you to have income. We want you to have housing for our moderate income people. There's nothing to stop us from saying that, right?
no,
But I think when everybody's already defining that this is what workforce housing is, to eliminate a whole section and say, well, we're going to define it differently, gets kind of counterproductive. I think that the generally accepted definition should be the generally accepted definition. And then I think where you get your number that you're multiplying by, your annual median income number, I don't have any problem at all using the city of Stewart's number because that is more precise for this area. So that is a lower number, which is fine. I don't have any problem with that. But I mean, I don't think, because otherwise we can then be getting in, well, let's call very low income people who are making less than 40%. We can start monkeying with all of those.
well, these definitions not necessarily tied into the HUD definitions.
These definitions of very low income, moderate, and workforce those percentage numbers do tie into HUD definitions. Those are the 4 categories that HUD uses.
So
that are
what is the problem with using those? The HUD definitions?
I've seen a lot of variation in these categories.
I've seen people
yeah.
define them on their own.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think that.
Well, if the baseline, I mean, if we are using the HUD Martin County standards, then this piece would need to reflect those. If that's,
I don't
that's
think you should
the-
mess with definitions is all I'm saying. So, I mean, if you did,
I'm happy not messing with definitions.
if you did, you know, if just do a.
So Lee, are you saying to keep the workforce housing definition in there at 140%?
So workforce housing is housing that's affordable to persons or families whose total household income, usually it's between over 120 and up to 140%.
Yes. So in effect, we wouldn't need to change this policy at all.
No, I still think you need to, because I think you need to define where you're getting your, and I don't think you capture that here. I think you need to define where you're getting your annual, your average median income.
There's
You
a
need to say
conflict,
that
between
MSA.
Stewart and MSA.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And area median income. I mean, you're not even agreeing on the same page. I mean, there's between 47 and 59 is 25% more than 47. That is a huge difference. I mean,
Right.
put it in the context of the discussion we have on that development just off of Commerce.
Sounds like the commission already decided to use the larger number.
Then it should say that. It should not say Stewart median income. I don't understand that.
It makes more sense. It's better for us if we use the median income. You know, it gives you more affordable housing.
Well, that's a big discussion, Christina.
Well, I mean, if that's what we're trying to get affordable housing, then use the Stewart, you know, instead of the, I don't know, I like the Stewart, using the Stewart income.
But I think, isn't Mike indicating that the decision has already been made to use the Martin County median income figure? Mike, didn't you say that?
The decision is ultimately going to be made upon the adoption of this document. The commission had a workforce housing workshop last summer, I guess it was. And during that discussion, they talked about using the different numbers. It all kind of washed out and we didn't do anything with it because the legislature amended the state statute to say that you couldn't demand workforce housing from a developer without paying them the difference in any reduced pricing. And as a result, it kind of didn't go anywhere. But now we're back to it because the EAR amendments are a comp plan adjustment. And as a result, there are incentives such as the waiver of impact fees and other development incentives that can be related to the provision of whatever particular type of housing you guys are interested in generating or stimulating in your area. What we found, though, is that it is virtually impossible to build a building and have your maximum rent be $932 a month and pay the actual construction costs. That was one of the issues we came across. So what the concern was is, well, if we use the Stewart number, what the commissioner said is that the sample is so low that it is not a true sample of income because Stewart is such a small area and because we have a ginormous number of 55 and older parcels that artificially decrease or deflate the workforce income numbers because that large number of 55 and olders don't actually have true workforce income. They also addressed the people that come to work every day looking for work or looking, the school teachers, the police officers, the firefighters, et cetera, weren't necessarily super low income people. It was more of just the workforce housing people. And that's what, where the debate kind of ended because of the statutory language. And I think David has a chart too.
Well, median household income, it doesn't say workforce income, Mike. It just says household income.
Right. And
So the retirees, I would assume that.
Right. So the city of Stewart has 9,000 parcels right now, and 6,000 of the parcels don't pay any ad valorem tax because the valuation of their parcels are so low. We found that the vast majority of those are the condominiums that are 55 and older on fixed incomes. So their income can literally be $6,000 a year, and they're living off of retirement savings, so it doesn't qualify as income, but it brings the average substantially lower, even though it's not a real reflection on what people are paying to live or how they're living.
So if you look at the table up on the screen, this table I put together as a result of that workshop in the direction that we got. And I actually can't remember if their vote was 80 to 90 to 100% or 70 to 100% being titled as the workforce. Terminology over here doesn't matter to me. What matters is the MSA, the fact that you're taking 30%, and what levels we're indicating. I guess terminology does matter to me for those indicators. I can't remember if it was 70% or 100%, but they took a vote.
I recall 100%, and unfortunately I mixed it up with the Stewart area census, so I got the 100%.
So the 59.5 was the number that we used, though.
Yeah, it's the MSA. Unfortunately, the MSA is what they wanted to use.
Those are low numbers. I mean, what's your concern, Christina?
Well, when we have the workforce, don't they just, it's not the whole development that it's put into workforce, right? It's just like maybe 5 units.
Well, it depends on the developer's choice, because we don't have an inclusionary ordinance that would require them to do that. So for instance, that project that came before you on Commerce and Indian, if they're saying we're proposing workforce, so we want this, additional density or additional whatever, you would have something to go by to determine whether or not they're actually providing the workforce or not. Just taking them by the word.
And in the other cases where they just put 5 units into workforce, then using the Stewart median income makes some sense, because it's not as if the whole development is going to be $900 for a 1-bedroom. Only 5 units, or maybe 1 unit would be that. So if we want affordable housing, we have to try to figure out how to make it affordable.
And then, and part of the discussion that they had was, are we providing housing for people that already live in Stewart, or are we providing housing for the people that are driving to Stewart to come to work every day and they don't have because the likelihood, if you built 400 apartments in any neighborhood today, that the 400 people living next door are going to sell or give up their apartment and move into the new ones is pretty low. What they expect is that new people are going to move into those. And so then they were saying, well, where are these new people coming from? Because you create a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you continue to create housing stock and residents that only earn below the average of what your current residents earn, your number continues to go down. And as a result, your median number, the median is supposed to be the middle of the average of the community. If we're taking 80% of the lowest number of the entire community, it literally has a long-term detrimental effect, is what basically was the discussion.
Well, I mean,
the question is, what's the community?
We could say the same about what we just approved. I mean, we just approved 324 units of affordable housing. And the reason that we felt the pressure to approve it was because we want affordable housing in Stewart. So do we want affordable housing or do we not?
they didn't call that project affordable. They called that project attainable.
Oh, well, there it goes. And there,
So there's a new buzzword.
yeah,
So workforce appears not to be a definition or a term being used any longer, but attainable housing. And that was why I was asking for the definition of what that is, because it seems to be a word people are using more. They're staying away from affordable, they're staying away from workforce, and now they're using the word attainable, and I'm just trying to figure out what the heck that means. You know, I've been here a long, long time, and the market drives what the developers are going to build, and if it's dictated that local government has to step to the plate to provide subsidies, nobody's going to build affordable housing. It's just not going to happen, and you're all you have to do is look around, and you'll see that. That's the problem. I mean, it used to be affordable housing was part of your comp plan, and that's all changing. That an incorrect statement, Kevin?
Well, now you got to be careful when you start to demand affordable housing. That's what the city attorney was saying earlier about we don't have at the moment an inclusionary housing policy or ordinance. Which that then commits the city to.
But you did you not?
We started to go down the path of it, and then the state passed a statute that made it illegal.
No, I know that, but you did have an affordable housing ordinance. It was part of your.
There still is language that says you can get your impact fees waived if you provide affordable housing. And they also we have language that says we can give you a 0% interest loan, which, by the way, we can't and we don't.
Well, that would be a subsidy.
yeah.
Right. But
Well,
you're right.
then Larry, why are we spending all this time defining this if we're not going to enforce it?
Well, that's a good question. Good question, because it has to be in your comp plan, but you basically ignore it. I think that's exactly what we're talking about here. It's an exercise in futility.
Right. What's the point?
In terms of this affordable housing element and all of this, because tell me the last project in the city of Stewart that achieved this.
Wasn't the one we just approved?
Larry wasn't here for the last meeting.
Oh,
No, I was here for the last
Yes, he
meeting.
was. Yes, he was.
Here for the last meeting. Did we achieve that? At what level?
what is it? Lee got him to 120 or 100. Right.
They believe they're at 120% of 59.
Right,
So-
of 59.
So they're affordable.
30% of that number.
Right.
30% of that number.
Well, it goes toward rent. Right.
Yes.
But right.
Personally, I think Stewart is a great place to live, so it should be more expensive. But there you go.
And I think when you're using
You and everybody else.
Right. So there you go.
floor and a cap, you need to show where you're going with it, because you're not pegging right on.
Someone can't be heard. Whoever's speaking cannot be heard.
It's Lee.
Okay.
That's because I'm turning around and talking.
Oh.
Yeah, so usually it's,
Between X and Y.
yeah, and it's like 81% to 100%, 100, over 100% to, but I think however you go, I think you need to define where you're getting your AMI. So if the city's already decided they want to use the AMI as from the metropolitan area that's defined by whoever defined it, that said it's the
Yes.
Port St. Lucie 59.5.
What we should have recommended is that table. I mean, the table and the categories applied to that table. Should
Yeah,
be
but I think that table still has some problems too, because I think that table, where's your table?
It went bye-bye.
That went away.
Going to put it up again. So you can, to answer Lee's question, you can look at the percentage categories and redefine those to be minimum and maximum. Is that what you're talking about for these particular categories?
Doesn't that cap the workforce at 100% then?
Yes.
So are you saying, Lee, we increase the workforce to 120%?
Well, and see, here's the other problem is that you're scaling it for the 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms.
This is a chart that's directly out of HUD or out of SHIP.
Yeah.
It looks like it adds $200 per.
And it's not supposed to include your utilities.
Correct.
You have to take your utilities, get
Are-
paid from that 30%.
They're in addition to that 30%.
30% is supposed to be your rent.
30% is just rent,
Just rent.
base rent.
So really what you're saying with that, what you should be saying with that chart is the last place that you can be affordable is at that 80% number. And then right as soon as you get to 81%, you become workforce.
Yes.
Or you're stopping at 79.
Yes.
If you're below that, you're.
Yes.
So we're saying that our workforce has an annual income of somewhere between, annual household income of somewhere between 47.6 and just under 71,399.
Okay, here's where I think maybe, see how it says low income at 50%? Shouldn't 60, 70, and 80 also be low income? And then it moves up to workforce. So there's very low, workforce.
Not according to the definitions.
No, between 50 and 80 is low income.
Right.
Right now we're showing 50 at low income, but then 60, 70, and 80 are all either
Oh, you're-
affordable or workforce.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. According, it's correct.
So the word affordable shouldn't really even be on
Doesn't
the
even be on this
terminology.
chart, correct.
Very low,
Yes.
workforce, and then
moderate.
and then whatever you want to call the above 120%. If the 120% is what we're gonna define as,
So you're trying to define affordable as moderate here. So normally, when you're sliding them up and down, think how you're sliding them back and forth. You have very low, then you have low, then you have moderate, then you have workforce, and then you have the rich people. Those are your 5 categories, right?
no. Affordable,
But affordable means you
Is
don't
the
spend more than
30%,
30%
yes.
of
So I
what
think
you make.
affordable, that
it's
word needs to
affordable.
be out of,
It doesn't need to be like this.
correct.
Affordable means you don't spend more than 30% of what you make on housing.
Affordable is below very low, strictly according to the definition. Affordable is less than 30. Very low is
No.
below 50. That's what I'm looking at.
It's 30% of your household income. Affordable
Oh, right, okay,
regarding who you are, right?
right.
And it doesn't necessarily mean moderate to very low income people. It means anybody.
No, the catch on that is that it's saying moderate to very low. That's the catch
Right.
with the affordable. So you very low, we're saying right now there's very low workforce. But workforce, affordable housing would not, by this definition, be included with workforce housing, because workforce housing is only,
Is moderate, which we took out.
which we took out. So we need to redefine this, I think, so it makes sense.
And then what?
Which is what we said.
So I think if you say affordable, the definition of affordable housing means safe and healthy and safe housing that people can live in without paying more than 30% of their household income. That's what affordable means. It doesn't matter if you're a low income household, if you're a very
Yes.
low income household, if you're a moderate income household, if you're a, whatever it is, if you're paying less than 30% of your household income, housing is then considered affordable to you.
Yes.
Okay.
That's
Okay.
across the board.
Okay.
doesn't matter anything about the categories.
Correct.
Then you have categories,
Yes.
right? Then you have categories, and however you want to define the categories. If you have very low, means an income falling below 50%. If you want to have low as falling from 50 to 79%, or say 80%. If moderate is income above 80%, up to 120%.
Why wouldn't
If
that be
workforce is,
Why wouldn't 80 to 120 be
I'm
the
looking at-
workforce? Forget moderate, forget the word moderate. Why do we need 4 categories and not 3?
I think the standard is 4. I think the standard is 4. And when you're trying to get, so when you're asking somebody to do something, you can ask them to create housing for moderate income households. Or you can ask them to create housing for workforce.
Realistically, you're gonna get a developer that comes in and has automatic zoning of up to 15 units. And he's gonna want 24 units an acre. And as a board, you guys are gonna say to him, well, what are you doing for the city to get 24 units an acre? And his response is going to be, as Ms. De La Vega pointed out, I'm gonna give 10 units integrated affordable housing, workforce housing, low-income housing, whatever it is. And so the definition of whatever that is, well, I don't think you guys are gonna care for the top levels. It's only gonna be the bottom 2 levels that are gonna be needed to be incentivized. Because you don't need to tell a developer, oh, I need you to, we'll only do that if you'll build 30% of the units at $10,000 a month.
But I think when you do that, you can say to the developer, okay, Mr. Strom, if you're giving us workforce, that's a help.
Right.
But I really like you if you're giving me something for moderate income too. If
But
you-
Mike, can we make an explicit request like that? We'll approve this if you give us, they can just say no.
Well, what they can, unfortunately, what the state statute that came out last year said was that if you cannot conditionalize the approval
Right.
on the housing. So you guys don't have the right to say,
No.
I'm not going to approve it unless you give me 10 units. But every single project that comes in does the converse. They come in and say to you, hey, just so you know, this is what we're doing. And if somebody comes in, like, for example, the project that came in last week, if they came in and said, we're providing workforce housing, well, just so you know, I've had 6 emails and I've seen it. Kevin's had several and a phone conference today at 3 o'clock, still trying to reconcile the discussion that Lee Roberts and that applicant had that was very clear and lasted about 20 minutes at the last meeting. But because we didn't define these terms specifically before they showed up, they leave with their memory of what the definition is. We leave with our interpretation of what happened, and the board has its memory of what happened. And sometimes they don't all align.
Well, just to clear, he had no idea what Lee was asking him, and that was a very confusing.
Exactly what we were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Well, apparently he didn't. But and to Larry's point, he did not say workforce. Workforce is not a term of art anymore.
You said affordable or attainable.
Right? He said it.
20% of the AMI and 30% of that is the maximum rent.
Yeah.
And we didn't define it as to whether it was 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, whether it was affordable, whether it was moderate income. The language we used was, the AMI is 59.5. You know that what 120% of that is.
Yes.
And you know that 30% of that is the maximum rent that you can charge. So it was
And that's what we've been relaying to them.
pretty clear in my mind. Pretty clear.
But there are, yeah.
But so,
David, the only thing on that, I would think, based on this definition, low income was between 50 and 80. So there was 3, it'd be very low as the top, then low, low, low. And then that's where it gets weird. Okay, is 80 and 90 affordable, and then 100 and 120 workforce? That's what I don't.
I can tell you in the housing workshop, the commission unanimously voted that it was either 70 or 80, I can't remember which, to 100% would be workforce housing. Anything above 100% would not be considered workforce housing.
Okay,
So
That
they're
makes sense.
using the 59.5 and they're using the 100%.
okay, so.
So what they're really saying is they've redefined workforce is what they've done. They've kept the definition for the lower two. They've redefined workforce and not defined anything above workforce. Realizing that if they're saying 100%, what they're saying is that if a household's income is 59.5, they're at the high end of affording workforce housing. That's what they're saying.
Top category, very low income, should be less than 50%, not 30%. Because what that percentage category will do would confuse you on that rate of affordable housing rent.
Right.
30%. So I think that 30% needs to be less than 50% for very low income. And then the low income is, again, I'm here is 50 to 80, but you're saying that commission has
Redefined it, okay.
redefined that. But so then what is low income?
And by the way, they recognize that it wasn't a number because they recognize that this is a moving target and this is intended to last for more than a couple months.
Yeah.
So when you pick something that we can reference,
Yeah, none of this would necessarily be in there. It would be, like you just said, less than 50%
Yeah.
low income.
I think less than 50% is very low income.
Right. And then what's,
And then from 50%, from a family income of 29,750 up to a family income of 47,600, just under 47,600
is low income?
is whatever they want to call it.
And then what, 90% is affordable and 100% is workforce? Based on.
Well, Kev, doesn't 3A 2.1 define it? I mean, why are we arguing? The table should agree with what it says. Either change.
Point of the discussion is adjusting that policy to reflect the outcome of the housing workshop.
Okay, well. The table and the policy should agree.
Very low income is that number right
Yeah,
there.
correct.
Up to 50% is very low income.
Yeah.
So anywhere between 30 and 50, anything, you could be making $2,000 of your family income. But if your family is making 29,750 or less, you're in very low income.
Yes.
That's where you are.
and by the way, when you say 29,750, if your family is making 50% of the PSL,
Right.
whatever,
So that number will change.
59.5.
moving target,
That number changes to
right,
$100,000.
that it's 50 grand.
Then it's 50 grand,
If I
yes.
change it right now, it's going to change all the way across the board.
Exactly.
Right, right.
So it's 50% of the AMI, up to 50% of the AMI would be very low income. So that would be very low income if you want to put it in L5. L5.
But what?
It's already over there.
It's
No, but it's,
It's on
very low income,
J5,
less than
J4.
50%.
So that's very low income.
so then we're going to say that low income is from 50% up to just under 60%.
Why?
Because 60% starts your moderate.
But not according to the definition.
No,
The definition between 50 and 80 is low income.
No, but we already know that the city has defined workforce as 80 to 100%. So if your income is between 80 to 100%, you're at workforce.
But if you're saying there's no in-between terminology, then we just change low income to cover all these
Yeah.
gamuts.
There's no requirement to have all these different categories. I mean,
Right.
And then workforce
Just make it
starts at
simple,
80%.
Keep it simple.
Workforce starts at 80% and goes all the way up to just under 120.
Nope. What was it? I thought it was 100.
100,
No, 100, yeah.
100, right? It includes 100.
100% is workforce.
yeah. And the other two higher ones don't even need a mention at the moment.
Greater than 50 to less than 80 is called low income.
Then 80 to 100.
And up to 50 is called very low income. And then we don't even care what we call anything over 100.
Correct.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So very low income is up to 50% of the AMI. Low income is anything over 50 to less than 80.
Yes.
And then workforce housing is being defined as 80% to 100%
Yes.
of the AMI for your family income. And then we're saying that we consider it, I would change from affordable to attainable, just so that
That would make it
so
easy.
that then you're not, so that then nobody's thinking that you're trying to redefine what HUD's doing or redefine something else. If you use attainable, then we're defining this is what's attainable in our community. So if you change that to attainable, keep it.
Along that comment, from an interpretation perspective, it probably makes sense as well, because imagine you get an application or a letter from a developer that says, I'll give you this type of housing. And he, of course, is thinking of HUD and you're thinking of a different number.
Yes.
And as a result, you start out with a
Yeah.
communication gap.
That we're not even talking about affordable, we're
Mhm.
talking about attainable housing.
Yes.
So we're defining attainable housing, and what we want is we want housing that's attainable to people. So the language, attainable housing is healthy and safe housing that for people, that people can live in without paying more than 30% of their household income.
Yep.
Not including utility payments. So that's what we define as attainable.
Yes.
And then we're saying, here's the categories, right? We define these 3 categories, and then we're kind of done.
They may actually, with that policies, make a more apparent split between the division, either 2 subparagraphs, one for attainable and then one for the categories.
Yes,
So they
and that your
separate,
first
yeah.
line where definitions and standards, make that attainable housing
Yes.
and income categories.
Yes.
So you're defining attainable, and then you're defining the income category.
I have to run to another appointment, but if anybody needs me, I'm available on my cell phone.
Do we know your cell phone number? What is that?
708-0817.
708
Google it.
08, what is it?
708-0817.
0817.
And they want to know what website your telephone number's on.
Everybody knows it now. Thanks.
Okay.
All right.
So we will adjust the policy to reflect this discussion.
Yeah, and if they want to use, if they've already decided to use the Port St. Lucie AMI or whatever they want to use.
I have a question. Not on that, just a general question from my background. When I was doing development, Stuart, 40 years ago, what comes to mind when we're doing this was that we used to use the statistical metropolitan area of Fort Pierce. Now I guess they call it what?
Port St. Lucie.
Port St. Lucie.
Yeah.
So my question is, you can call it that, but do you include Fort Pierce in the statistical metropolitan area?
It
No.
is.
Yes, it's all combined.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's already defined for us.
So if you lump all 3, Fort Pierce, St. Lucie, and Stuart in the same, when they call it basket, we're really doing the same thing as of the Fort Pierce statistical metropolitan area.
We are, but we're not, because we're redefining what
The
we
area.
call, no, so we're allowing that number, the multiplied number, we're allowing the 59.5 to be the same,
Okay.
but we've changed what we've called things.
Okay. So
So instead of saying that workforce housing is 120 to 140%,
what you're doing is you're averaging, you're comparing Fort Pierce, Port St. Lucie, and Stuart of dollar amount of income rather than,
correct.
okay, and my guess is, I think I'm right, the income is a little lower in Fort Pierce. And
But
maybe,
that number is higher than what the census number is if we just took the city of Stewart. Because the city of
Okay.
Stewart's number is 47,371, and the metropolitan area number is 59.5.
what comes to mind is though, you can buy a lot in Port St. Lucie for 40,000 as an example, and in Stuart it's 70.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
the demographics are different, but
But that's why it's appropriate to move those
yeah, I'm not arguing
categories
it.
down.
Yeah, I'm just saying that's what
Or-
came to mind and I wanted to get it out. That's all.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it.
And then you're also changing the objective title to attainable, so that
Yes.
everything's attainable and no longer. Okay, well, we beat that one up.
Okay,
That's good, thank you.
And A26 would also be attainable.
Staff are recommending that we look at policy 5.A5.5. Be careful how you say that, you might dial Mike Mortel, I think. So we're adding the word average, that buffers shall be a minimum average width of 50 feet. And that is to clean up some previous decisions that were made and planned unit developments that were put in place based on the land development regulations, which allowed an average width of 50 feet with the wetland buffers. And that's been a common point of discussion.
Why average? Because it's, so it can be wider and narrower a lot. So it's not just like one swath of 50 feet,
That's what you, I mean,
5, and then it could be 40.
yeah, the shape of wetlands is not regular. And when we look at development applications and requirements to get access or whatever, there is usually a bit of give and take in terms of the buffers.
But aren't the buffers upland?
The minimum that we allow that to go down to is around 25, I think, 25 feet. But we do have instances where that's accommodated by the wetland buffer being raised to 75 to 100 feet. So we are seeing an average of 50 feet around the wetland. We just want to clarify that in the comprehensive plan. Land development regulations already have that in place.
So the smallest that it could be would be 20, 25 feet?
25 feet, yes.
Okay.
You know, we really do work to limit that impact. And if there is an impact, we try and justify that with expansion of the buffer in other locations where it is able to be expanded.
We trust this for protection. Do you know what I mean? Like, is this something that could be, and I just don't know, but is this something that could be used against itself? You know what I mean? Mike, should I call you on the phone?
Well, I think this is being, the application of this is already happening.
Okay.
That's why we're making this clarification, and this is not really to change a policy direction or how things are being interpreted. This is just to clarify the language so people understand more clearly that that's what we do.
Clear.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Okay.
Everybody else?
yep, good.
And a final clarification in policy I keep saying A, in policy 5.A5.6, which is exceptions to policy policy 5.A5.5. Clarification that mitigation with the same watershed basin should be in the city of Stewart as a priority, rather than outside of the city of Stewart. Yes.
Are you saying the same watershed basin, or are you saying with any watershed
The
basin in the
same-
city of
The
Stewart?
same watershed basin.
So,
So if we have an impact,
so you have not given me an option of mitigation with a watershed basin in the city of Stewart?
yes, number 3 does that.
Okay.
We're making it more clear that the priority should be to attempt to locate within the watershed basin, in the same watershed basin in the city limits, rather than pushing it outside where possible.
Okay, all right,
That's great. That's really a good thing, I think.
okay.
Makes sense?
Yep.
Yeah. And I think those are the major housekeeping things that we discovered in the plan. There are obviously few editorial things that have been looked at, and I'm sure there's more to find, but those are the major pieces that we want to get moved forward. And the most important thing is to get the EIR amendments to the DEO as soon as we can.
Okay, we're going to open it up to general comments.
Do you want to go by section or do you just want to be in general?
Let's go by section. So the first thing we will do is we've already discussed the summary, future land use element recommended changes. Does anybody have a discussion on that?
What are you doing?
Well,
I'm going by the,
No,
the numbers though?
you need to go by this. You need to go by section 1 for introduction. Go all the way back to
the
your
whole
front.
ear.
Yeah, just for the ear. Don't go into that other stuff or we'll be here forever.
Okay, so in
Trust
the
me.
ear,
Here, these. These are sections.
okay.
Got it?
Section 1, comments.
I'm good. I have a
Is
couple
that like policy
typographic.
one on here? Is that what we're?
Section 1, introduction.
Introduction.
Oh, okay.
Okay, seeing none. Section 2, community engagement.
The what?
Community
Community
engagement.
No,
Fine.
I'm going by the page numbers, the sections. That not good.
Okay, yeah, so we're up to the next page we're going to be on is page number, community engagement is page number 12 to 14. Got anything in that yet?
I'm going to, let me know when it's.
Are you doing the
26.
page at the top or the page at the bottom?
Well, the page at the bottom is 20. I'll say.
Okay, all right, okay, keep going.
Okay, general recommendations, number 3.
I think I might have had something in that one. No,
Okay, anybody, nobody, okay?
wait. So general recommendations, page 20 on the bottom? Did you have something for
Yeah,
page
that's
20
it.
on the bottom? No, that's a 4. Never mind. Go ahead.
Okay, environment, 4.
That's you now.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay, I just had a comment on what we were talking about before, Lee. The B, renewable and alternative energy and resource use.
Yeah.
But 2/3 of the way down, it says, providing a matrix of choices for developers such as incentives for electric charging stations and quantifying solar requirements for appropriate projects. So it's in there, we just have to come up with an ordinance that we proposed.
Okay.
I think y'all have.
So what that means is that that staff needs to know that we know that it's there as a
That's right.
4.2B, and it means that we're thinking you're bringing it back,
That is a follow-up item that staff will be
right?
working on.
And let me jump up because I didn't print it all out and I only have page numbers. At the top of the page, it's the same subject. Page 114. If you look to 114, it says, it prints it out really small, and I don't wear glasses. So a commercial development of which more than 200 parking spaces are required shall also make provisions for inclusion of a transit stop at a location. Oh, is that the wrong? No. Wait a minute.
What page do you think you're on?
114 with 2A something?
I'm jumping ahead of myself.
Not yet.
This is about bus stops.
Okay,
Okay,
Yep.
okay, we're getting there.
You're not there yet. Let me
Not
know
there
when
yet.
we're there.
There
I'm
yet.
sorry.
that's all right. Number 5, neighborhoods.
Did we do 4?
I think we,
Yep.
did anybody have anything else on environment?
I had a 4.
Okay, all right.
4.4, which would be either page number 26 or page number 32. Go figure. So 26 if you're looking at the bottom page, 32 if you're looking at the top page.
Okay.
And I have a note on there that says, is that an appropriate place? This is resilience and sustainability, right?
Right.
So is that an appropriate place to have something about infrastructure for electric vehicles? Encourage,
I didn't see that. But I don't have it. Go ahead.
you know, because you have add policy to be a designated soul smart community,
Right.
strengthen policy to encourage new development and higher elevations, add policy to replace fleet vehicles with hybrid electric cars when possible.
Right.
Is that a decent place to put encourage something? I had encouraged new development to include infrastructure for electric vehicles, but,
Resilience and sustainability.
okay.
Well, that's a good point, Lee.
Then on page 27 on the bottom or 33 on the top, under conservation. And actually it goes on to the next page, but as you're looking at that, number 6 says update landscape code to remove inconsistencies and encourage the use of Florida friendly and native plants. I know in another place you have something that says other techniques to not have to use sod.
Right.
And I think it should also be in the conservation piece.
Okay.
Because I think you've got pieces that are overlapping doing that. You already have it somewhere else, but I mean, I think it can be, it fits in your conservation piece since you have your,
I think that was with parking, something to do with parking.
yeah, you have the Florida friendly and native plants. I mean, I have that language there. And that's all I had for 4.
Okay.
Thank you, Lee.
Number 5, neighborhoods.
Page, please.
Page number, if you're looking at the bottom, it's page number 29. If you're looking at the top, it's 35. And it goes to page number 39 or on the bottom or 45 on the top. I had one on page 38 on the bottom, page 44 on the top. That's where you have under E, you have 2. Encourage a variety of ground covers within landscape requirements, including xeriscape ground cover options to reduce the requirement for sod in new development. So that's where you have it there. But I also think it shouldn't just be new development. I think it should just be anything. I don't think you should narrow it down to new development. I think it should just be, and I don't even know whether that's really what you want to be saying, reduce the requirements for sod. I don't know, because if one of the things we're trying to do is not have a requirement for sod, then I don't know how you get there from here. See what I mean? I mean, it's which came first, the chicken or the egg? But if you're truly trying to get people to just use xeriscape, et cetera, I mean, the code right now says any place that you don't have, you'll put sod in. So the intent is to not put, that you don't have to put sod in, then I think we need to be consistent in several places. So I had that one there. What page are you have next in your list?
No, I just was making a point. I remember reading about this with parking and that, but
Okay.
you covered it.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Are we on? You guys good?
Yep.
Virtual people?
Good.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Okay, good. All right, mobility, number 6.
I had something for 6.
Lee?
Okay, page 42 on the bottom, page 48 on the top. The paragraph that says, in conjunction with the MPO, Stewart is encouraging bike use by increasing bike lane miles, requiring bicycle parking and supporting facilities in new developments, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. I think somewhere you ought to say, you ought to mention that we put in all those green things out there. You know, I mean, it's something that we've done and we are encouraging it on city-owned.
So we could say an expansion of the existing.
Yeah, something along those
program.
lines to kind of acknowledge, I mean, because this document is supposed to be showing what things you've accomplished as well as what direction you're going.
Well,
But I-
doesn't it say require bicycle parking and supporting facilities in strategic locations throughout the city? Isn't that inclusive of those green things?
Yeah, but it's saying that that's the direction we're going. It's not acknowledging, as in other things do, to say that we're already doing something. And this is we have an existing program and that we're expanding the existing program, et cetera. So I think that just needs to be reworded to reflect that.
I had a thought on that and I didn't write it down, but in a lot of other cities, what they're doing is where you can lock up your bicycle, they have a little sign showing the signals. And it helps two people, it helps the drivers and the bicyclists, because somebody puts their arm up to make a left-hand turn. A driver will think, oh, they're just waving at me, you know? And I think maybe something could be done about that as far as educating the public, bicycle riders and the drivers.
Yeah, we can put that down as a follow-up thing too.
I got something
No, I had
else.
more on this
Okay,
section.
go
You want me
for
to keep going or you
Go
want to
for
go
it.
first?
Let me do it so you
Okay,
can
go ahead.
take
Go
a
ahead.
breath.
All right.
Maybe this was covered in the workshop, but there was no mention of any golf cart for multimodal. And I know it's pretty popular. I have one. I know a lot of people over in the St. Lucie Estates area use those. And I think the city's been pretty good about implementing that policy to allow golf cart riding in the city. I don't know, it may be too late for that, but it's something I think that should be considered. And then this is
I
gonna
already have
blow
that
your
written
mind.
down.
You have that?
See, look, golf carts are.
Good job. So this is an exhibit. It's a table on page 107, 108. So I have to go to that transportation element.
Okay.
Yeah.
It looks like it's an outdated table because it's got the 2008 generalized level of service. And there's discussions on the Green River Parkway is funded. It's going to be built. The Indian Street Bridge is funded. So clean that table up.
Okay. Yeah, policy 2A15.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. 2A15. Okay. Back to you, Lee.
What page did we leave?
So bottom page 46, top page number 52. So these are 6.4 recommendations. So I think under walkability and pedestrian infrastructure or somewhere in there, you can add another thing about electric vehicle hookups, all right? I think you can also add something under multimodal transportation, whether it's encourage or something, encourage future planning for bus stops, for future multimodal transportation, so that like we're trying to do every time we're seeing something of where's your bus planning on stopping? But, we can at least encourage that down there. And I also had.
There's something on page 114.
Oh, wait, let me go back and look at that page.
Lee, you missed that?
No, I haven't gotten to 114. I'm on page
Well, I know, but
46.
it's there. See it? Middle of the page. 2A7.14.
Yes, so that's the one that's required,
Right.
but we should also be encouraging it of pretty much
Okay.
anyone. You know what I mean?
Well, the last development over on East Ocean Boulevard, they were resisting that.
Yeah.
We're just going to put a bench out after I suggested it, but we'll put a bench out. But I think it needs more than that.
Yeah. Well, and I think the other thing is that, and I think I had this discussion. Did I have this discussion with you or did I have this discussion with somebody else? No, I'm looking at it. About at least when we mark where the bench is going to be, that years down the road when they decide, oh my gosh, we should put a bench up, we at least know where benches should be, like which side of the traffic they should be on. So by at least marking where, even if it's just a future bench, at least they kind of know, oh, that's where the bench is supposed to go, instead of putting it in their median or something, because you know how these.
Lee, it also states, and I don't mean to interrupt, but, trash receptacles, lighting, and a covered structure. And I think that's important. At night, you might need lighting, and if kids are waiting for the bus to go to school and they got a candy bar wrapper, they're going to throw it on the ground. So.
Yeah. I also had a note under multimodal that somebody needs to put something in there about golf carts, whether it's we like them, we don't like them, or whatever, but just something since that's a future recommendation for that. And then on the next page, which is page 47 on the bottom and page 53 on the top, number 6 for parking talks about encouraging additional electric vehicle charging facilities at existing and new parking facilities. And I'm having an issue with your word additional, because it's assuming that you already have some. So if you have none, so I like that it's either existing or new. And I don't think it should just be parking facilities. I think it's anywhere where there's parking. So I don't think that's a parking, necessarily a parking facility. I think it's kind of like anywhere there's parking, it should be encouraged, not just an expansion of what you already have. That was 2 comments in the same.
Retrofitted.
Yeah. And that's all I had for 6.
Okay. Number 7, public services. Any comments?
I'm waiting for 201. Page 201.
No?
I
Okay.
was going to say that I think the charts on page 51 are screwed up, but I'm not going to go there. We'll just see how well your predictions come true.
Okay, number 8, community and economic development.
Right?
Okay, you've done 8.
Page 57 on the bottom, page 63 on the top, policy number 7, or recommendation number 7. Create policy to capitalize on the city's character, elevate the historic architecture, and invest in cultural landmarks and art installations. I know that when we had a workshop, we questioned, when we do this, if we're committing money, we're committing money. And I don't know whether that's the intent for the city to commit money to invest in cultural landmarks and art installations. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if it's,
Encourage.
something, but I mean, I think it's just when we're creating a policy to capitalize, to elevate, and to invest, I think we're creating a policy where somebody's going to be coming up with money, and I don't think we have.
Do we still have art in public places?
Yes, we
Yes.
do, but this would be,
Oh, why isn't it that?
Yeah.
but we have that policy. I don't think we need to create a new policy. Creating a policy for cultural landmarks, and I just think that needs to be reworded some way where it's not costing money.
But maybe that is what we want to spend money on.
What?
Maybe that is important to spend money on.
And I'm not saying that it's not. I'm just saying that at the workshop, when the city commissioners we were all being advised that be careful what you commit to, because whatever you commit to, if it has a thing that you're going to spend money on, you will have to do it. It needs to be a conscious decision instead of something that was just sent in the ear that now we didn't do because it wasn't a conscious decision and that wasn't the intent. So I think that's up to the people with the big buck salary, but I think they just need to know that that's what they're doing. Okay.
Okay. I had a comment on element 10, the public schools facility element. Page 182, it looks like it's outdated. Page 183, there's another table, outdated. Page 191, 192 is a CIP from 2011 to 2015. That's outdated. There's growth dates on the table 10-1, 10-2, 10-3, 10-4, 10-5. So 207, basically, I would look at that whole element, look at the dates, and see what new information we get.
Yeah, staff is intending to look at that element in its entirety,
Okay.
pull out what is necessary and put that into separate elements and remove that element. It's no longer a required element.
Okay. Okay. All right. Who else has any comments, questions?
Wait, let me see if there's anything else.
When you get to 201, let me know.
201?
We're not there yet.
Not on 201.
Page 140 of 242. the language under goal statement 3B, objective 3B1, preserve historic housing. So when we're saying we'll maintain and update our inventory of historic and archaeological resources completed in 2002, how often are we maintaining and updating it? Because it would make it seem like it was completed in 2002 and there's no, I mean, unless somebody has free time to be doing updating.
Right, yes, yeah, staff did note that. I guess we're looking for direction on whether we should continue to inventory the historic archaeological resources on a what type of basis.
I think it just needs to be maintained now, because since we did it in 2002, we know how old everything is, and everything just gets a year older every year. It's not like we're importing anything that's 30 or 40 years old.
But isn't the definition essentially 50 years or older is historical in the city?
Yeah, but
so every year you're getting more.
No, but they know what all those are because they have the dates of everything. So the report that we saw years and years ago, had the stuff that was still in the hopper waiting to come up. So it's like it just needs to be added to the list. It's not like you need to go out and reinvent the wheel.
Right, true.
You know what I mean? That was when you were here before you went there and then went there and then, you know, remember that? Yeah.
Can you just
have some resources been deleted, been eliminated? Or?
Yeah, we could remove that reference.
I mean, it doesn't seem to be asking much. Just,
what was that, Campbell?
I'm saying, have any of those resources detailed in 2002 been demolished or sold off? I mean, are they no longer in that list, on that list?
Some have.
Some of them have, yes.
So I think that's all that's saying is, here's the list in 2002. Some have come on and some have gone off. That seems a reasonable description of.
That's fine. I just wanted to point out that it's something that you all in your spare time are supposed to be doing.
Okay.
Page 153.
What element?
It isn't really an element. I just wrote it on the bottom of the page. There's typographical error, but also, and down at the bottom where you're talking about it's policy 5.A.3.3. Talks about the 2-day per week year-round landscape irrigation restrictions, right? Should we also include the fertilizer ban?
Yes.
In there?
Absolutely.
Have it. So, I mean, I think it should be, I think it needs to be added to that. We're not to 202 yet. Page 155 of 242, policy A5, 5A54.
5A54.
Just talking about the Florida friendly and native plants. I think you can also put some sod language in there. You did the average. Okay. Does the city of Stuart have a plan for Flagler Park, the youth center park, and the redevelopment of the rec center?
Not aware.
Flagler Park, youth center park, and redevelopment of the rec center.
What's
Page 163 of 242, policy number 6A115 is saying that the city is going to do that.
Flagler Park is done. I don't know what youth center park is, and there is one for the rec center.
Okay, well, just if we've either done it but I don't think we need to say we're going to do it again if we've done it, but I think or maybe it needs to come out of something. I forget you're back there.
Me too.
Okay, my next one is at 211. So what did you have for 202?
201, just a matter of definition. It deals with single-family residential lots and private multifamily residences. And I'll read the first one and you'll get it. It's single-family residential lots with water frontage are allowed to have one dock per lot. I think the technical definition would be a pier, and a dock is a hole in the water where you put a boat. So you dock a boat, you don't pier a boat, but there is a pier. So I think we just need to clear that up. That's just my understanding.
Yeah, we've had that discussion before.
That's all I have.
That's interesting.
I also had all the notations, like around page 211, et cetera, that had all the school stuff. You know, you had something about the 5-year plan. The last one you're referring to was the one adopted in 2010. They adopt one every year, so.
Sounds like they're getting rid of that element.
And that's all I have.
Great. Anything else, Larry, Christina, or Campbell?
We're
I'm
good.
good.
No, good.
Good deal.
Guys.
Thank you, staff.
Thank you.
Consultant, appreciate it. Any other comments before we adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved, all those in favor?
All right.
Aye. Have a good night, everybody.
Night.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you, staff.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Okay. Like what?